Hello and welcome to today's webinar, HVAC inline components and predefined piping port visualization with 3D SymbolDesigner. My name is Daniel Dolinski and this webinar will take about 25 minutes, including the Q&A session at the end. So that's today's agenda. We basically will focus on a live demo on the improved and new functions in 3D SymbolDesigner. And we expect from the audience that you are a power user of 3D SymbolDesigner or Smart 3D. So you should know how to use 3D SymbolDesigner. So if you haven't worked with the tool, please have a look at our YouTube channel. We have some videos about 3D SymbolDesigner, and we have also a manual and a demo version of the tool online. And if you are interested in 3D SymbolDesigner, please feel free to contact us so we can arrange a session, especially for you explaining the tool itself. So as I said, this is for power users of the tool, and we will focus on two new functionalities in there. So the first one is the HVAC inline components got improved in the last major release. And we have also added predefined piping port visualization to the piping port. So that's mainly based on the configuration in the config Excel file. And I would like to show you how you can use both features now. And after this short live demo, we will have a short Q&A session where you can ask questions and I try to answer them. So when we talk about HVAC inline components, I would like to show you how this looks like in Smart 3D. So we are talking about these items here. So you have an HVAC system there, and on the system you can place duct features, and here we have this component that was created using 3D SymbolDesigner. So that's what I want to show you, the new functionality regarding these inline components. So let's start in 3D SymbolDesigner then. So you should know 3D SymbolDesigner already, so you can place objects using these buttons up here and place the connectors. And for HVAC, you can use these HVAC ports and connectors to make your symbol dependent on these input parameters. That's just a little reminder of the basic functionality of the tool. Now we have two demo projects coming with 3D SymbolDesigner, and they are included in the sample subfolder. So even if you download the demo version of the tool, and it's the newest version, you can find these two files here. They don't look that much different. So if you look at them, it's basically what we've seen there in Smart 3D on the screenshot. But there's a major difference here. So this one here, it's the standard reducer. And we have standard ports on both sides. So this means when you place this one on the HVAC in Smart 3D, all these sizes are defined by the profiles that are defined there in the catalog. The other example, we see that down here we have occurrence attributes on all these parameters compared to the other one where we don't have the occurrence attributes. So for this example, we can reuse the settings for the power depth, power width, and so on, also in the parameters. So more about this in a second. So we have fixed the display and improved the display of the connectors. So that's the HVAC connector, and you can change the extrusion length of the connector itself. And you can also, for example, change the cross-section shape. So 1 is the rectangular shape. 2 would be the dummy. So that's just showing you the local coordinate system for this connector. And we've got 3, which is the oval shape, and 4, sorry, seems the connection is a bit slow. So 4 for the cylindrical shape. So let's set this back to 1. So that is a new feature in here. And for the inline components, we can reuse the input parameters in the formulas. And that's exactly what we did in here. So we have this set of input parameters for the HVAC port. And as you can see, when I go to the formula for depth, it's not a fixed value, it's reusing the part depth 1. So it's this parameter down here, also for the depth value of the HVAC port. So this means that when you use these occurrence attributes down here and you make your input parameters on the port dependent on the generic input parameters for the symbol, then you have the possibility to change these values directly on the Properties tab in Smart 3D. And not only the truncated rectangular prism in the middle would resize, but also both flanges here would resize according to these settings. So that's the new functionality regarding this HVAC inline components. We've also improved a little bit the output regarding the Excel sheets that get produced there. So it should be easier now to test these symbols. There's one thing I want to make you aware of. It's like in piping, the y-axis would be up. So that's the reason why we have this shape. So you would like usually to work in this mode where the y-axis is up. So that's the same coordinate system as for the piping inline components. So it's different compared to equipment and so on. So for equipment, you would have set axis up, and now it's y, like for the piping inline components. So basically that's it regarding the first feature. So you can change the cross-section shape, and you can also use these input parameters not only to define the shape of the truncated rectangular prism in this example, but also to set the port information directly. Then regarding the real major change for the piping, as you can see here with this symbol, the piping port 1 and piping port 2 have a lot of extra values in here. So in the old versions, you would always use a 1 and a 2 to define the first and the second port. And now you can see we have these string values in here. So these string values, they help us to get a feeling for the look of the symbol based on the settings for the first and the second piping port. So what happens here is when I select, for example, the first row, you can see we have male US default 2-inch here. You can see we have some values, and these values, they get set directly by the string. So if I change this to, for example, the female one here, you can see that the end prep is switching to 421, which has been 301 for the male connection. So this means you can now, using these strings, test your symbols in a much better way, because it's really setting the values for the piping ports based on these string values. Another example is this globe valve here. So here it's mainly about the resizing of these nozzles. So I can just step from globe valve variant to globe valve variant, and it's resizing accordingly. With the old version, you would just have the 1 and the 2 in these columns, and for testing, you would have to set these values manually, and now it's copying these values directly over here. So we are planning a feature in the future to also export this to the bulk load file, so we would have a better bulk load file template depending on these input parameters. It's not there yet, but I think it's already a very helpful feature to have these string values down here. So how does it work? You know that you have these config Excel files to configure 3D SymbolDesigner. So for example, you add the attributes in here, you have the aspect code and so on. And as you can see, usually the last sheet was aspect view style, and we added a couple of new sheets to this bulk load, to this config Excel file. So first one is piping ports male, and let's just compare this with the other example. So the globe valve A, you can see we have these strings in here. And if we look them up over here, you can find them over here. So basically, the strings you have there, they also show up in the first column of these sheets. So we have one sheet for the male connections with a certain set of attributes. We've got one for the bolted connection with a set of attributes, female, and mechanical. So feel free to add these sheets to your configuration file. So if you have already a configured configuration file within your company, just add these sheets. So when you download the newest version of 3D SymbolDesigner and you install it, it's asking if you want to install a newest config Excel file. So just do a copy of your original one, overwrite it with the new settings, and afterwards you will be able to copy these sheets to your original configuration file. And of course, you can have all the settings you like in here. So you can have different names, add additional ones, delete them, whatever you like. So how do we do the settings, for example, for the end standard? Because we have to have a number to map this to Smart 3D. So that's done using the last sheet here, piping port mapping. So for the end standard, if the value is US default, we would set a 5 for the code list. So basically, we look up the end standard via the US default value and the piping port mapping, and then we would use number 5 there. So let's see if that works. If I select the first variant, I get an end standard of 5 here for the test values. If I select, for example, this variant here, I get the 421. So let's have a look at the file over there. The 421 would be this end prep here. So that's corresponding to this value or this row over there in the configuration file. So that's how it works. You just have to add some sheets to your configuration file. Of course, you can use the values we have in here, but you can completely modify this so that it's working for you. And we think it's a good new feature if you have to build up generic piping symbols with a lot of possible variants, because then you can have the long list of variants in here, and then it's just reacting to the settings in the piping port 1, piping port 2, and so on. And of course, you can keep it as it is. So if you don't use these strings and you keep your 1 and 2 and piping port 1 and piping port 2, it's still working. Then it's working as it has worked in the past. But if you add the strings, it will look up the values and copy them over here to the piping ports. So basically, that's it from my side regarding these new features.